Nintendo, being a Japanese company, obviously makes games for Japan first before localizing them for the rest of the world. Whether games even go down the path of localization or not can be up in the air. It goes beyond just translating a game's text. Items, events, character designs, context, and plenty of other things need to be changed to fit with another country's cultural norms. However, back in the 80s, Nintendo had to take into account two radically different pieces of hardware when bringing their games westward. Beginning in 1986, Nintendo was solely focusing on the Famicom Disk System, an add-on to the Famicom, Japan's version of the NES. The disk system had a few advantages compared to the Famicom. For one, it had more processing power, which allowed for more advanced music. But the big thing was that it used floppy disks, which were cheaper to produce, rewritable, harder to pirate, had more storage, and saving options. It was because of these advantages that Nintendo made their games exclusive to the Famicom Disk System for an amount of time. But it was also because of these advantages that it took longer for these games to come to the NES, and even then, some would be downgraded in ways. A prominent example of this was with Metroid. You see, it initially released on Famicom Disk System with this really nice save feature. However, when it came to the US, we got a password system instead. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally, because in comparison, The Legend of Zelda was a launch title for the Famicom Disk System, and it came to the US a little over a year later. It still came before Metroid though, and yet it retained its save feature. Then again, the Famicom version doesn't have this. So who are the real winners here? So while yes, the disk system was in ways better than the base Famicom and the NES, it didn't take long for those two to catch up and surpass the disk system. Take for example, Ghosts 'n Goblins and Super Mario Bros. 2. Ghosts 'n Goblins was released on the Famicom in cartridge form in June 1986, only a few months after the launch of the disk system, and it only took until November that same year for it to come to the NES. And it was on a 128 kilobyte cartridge, just like those supposedly bigger and better floppy disks. As for Super Mario Bros. 2, it's a relatively well-known fact that the American version is a reskin of Doki Doki Panic in Japan. However, it's actually much more than just a reskin, as Super Mario Bros. 2 has much more advanced and just better music than Doki Doki Panic, which released on Famicom Disk System. I think that these two games alone show that cartridges eventually became better than floppy disks in the end. However, that doesn't mean the disk system was obsolete or useless. There were still tons of games released for the disk system that took full advantage of the hardware and couldn't be done with cartridges, including but not limited to the subject matter of today's video. But before that, I gotta talk about this guy. I would like to start off this section with a quote from Yoshio Sakamoto from an interview with Computer and Video Games magazine back in 2003. He had this to say about his relationship with Mario and Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto. All in all, I respect him very much, and I think he's a wonderful creator. But I think my initial goal was to come up with ideas that Mr. Miyamoto would not dare to challenge. So I'm not going to compete with Mr. Miyamoto on the same ground. I think it's my mission to always come up with something very different from what Mr. Miyamoto is likely to do. You see, Yoshio Sakamoto isn't as well known as other legendary Nintendo developers, but he's arguably just as interesting. He's most known for his work on Metroid, mainly the classic 2D ones, and that's it. But he's also worked on Kid Icarus on NES, Wario games beginning with Wario Land 4, Rhythm Heaven, Tomodachi Life, and Miitopia. If you know something about these games, it's that they're really weird. I mean, comparing Super Mario to Wario Land is like night and day. While Mario sees you going through cohesively themed worlds with levels designed around skill-based platforming, Wario will change themes, ideas, and mechanics every time the player blinks. And I think that's exactly what Sakamoto intended. He continues to let his ideas run wild, and doesn't really care if what he makes fits with Nintendo or not, because he just wants to be unique and stand out amongst his peers. And in 1987, coming off the release of Metroid and Kid Icarus, Sakamoto took his first leap into something different from what anyone at Nintendo was doing. At the time, text-based adventure games were very popular in Japan. The Portopia serial murder case is easily the most prominent example. Sakamoto was heavily inspired by this game, but he wanted to take his own spin on the genre, using the power of the disk system. So with all this in place, he made Nakayama Miho no Tokimeki High School. This game was made in collaboration with Square, before they made Final Fantasy. You assume the role of a high school student trying to hook up with Miho Nakayama, some Japanese celebrity people had the hots for back in the day. This is actually considered to be the very first dating sim, and Miho herself was very involved with the project. On top of being a huge collaborative effort, it was also pretty innovative, with tons of new, unique gimmicks that actually kinda made the game not that good. As you progressed, you would get phone numbers, which you'd use to hear pre-recorded messages from Miho Nakayama herself, which acted as hints and story details. However, the recordings were taken off the air only a year after release, making an already punishing game that much more difficult. When talking to Miho in-game, you had several options for not only what you wanted to say, but what facial expressions you wanted to make, which would be really interesting if it wasn't for the fact that every other option that isn't the right one leads you to a near instant game over. And you're flipping the disc around constantly, much more than any other disc system game would ever ask of you. Aside from that though, the game was a hit, and it helped influence a similar project that Sakamoto was working on for Nintendo. Hey, why not talk about that? I have nothing but time. Famicom Detective Club Kieta Kokeisha, translating to Famicom Detective Club The Missing Heir, was developed in Nintendo Research and Development Team 1, led by Gunpei Yokoi, Satoru Okada, Toru Osawa, and yeah, the Metroid guy. Most, if not all of this team worked on Nakayama Miho no Tokimeki High School, so they had a bit of experience with text-based adventure games at this point. Even though they wanted a more mature detective story, like with Portopia, they also wanted to appeal to a wider demographic, like with Tokimeki High School and, you know, every single Nintendo game. So one of the first things decided on were the two protagonists. They wanted to make characters that were inspiring to kids, yet relatable to older players, so to reflect this, they made them into two teenagers. One boy, the player named and controlled character, and one girl, your partner Ayumi Tachibana. Apparently, Yoshio Sakamoto wrote the entire story for the game within 3 days. Other sources say he did it within 3 hours on a napkin, but I find days to be much more believable. Either way, when he turned it into Osawa to be edited, it was extremely sloppy and full of grammatical errors. Even with the final script, lines could be taken out of context in weird ways, which actually led to a lot of inside jokes among the development team. Anyways, as for the story itself, it starts with you, the player-named character, being woken up by a man who just found you lying on the side of a cliff, and it's revealed that you have lost your memory. After he cares for you for the night, you go back to the cliff where you meet this girl who tells you that you are a detective. From then on, you continue your investigation of a string of murders among a wealthy family, while trying to remember who you are. The game took full advantage of being on the Famicom disk system, releasing in 1988 on 2 whole discs, one on April 27th and the other on June 14th. The way progression worked was that you would complete part 1 and then use that to transfer your data over to part 2 by swapping them out within the Famicom disk system. I mean, because it was such a big game, it was kind of necessary to have a 2-disc release, but it just makes things a lot more complicated for the player. Like, imagine thinking you can use your part 1 disc to have part 2 rewritten on it, and then going home and realizing you can't progress because you need your part 1 disc to transfer your data over to part 2. I guarantee you this probably happened at least once, and it probably pissed some Japanese kid off. Even with these issues, the game was still a success, being praised for its story, nice graphics, good music, and more mature themes. Well, at least that's what I've heard. Yeah, being a Japanese text-based adventure game, if anyone outside of Japan wants to play this, well, they better be a proficient Google Translate user, because there's really no better option right now. On top of that, information on these games in general is very scarce online, so whatever I can present to you in this video is very limited. However, right after the success of The Missing Heir, the exact same team, becoming internally known as Team Shikamaru, started work on the sequel Famicom Detective Club Part 2 Ushiro ni Tatsu Shoujo, translating to Famicom Detective Club Part 2 The Girl Who Stands Behind. This game is actually a prequel, showing the origin story of our protagonists and how they met. Many other things were different about this game, as they wanted to be a lot more ambitious. There were a few subtle differences, like a much cleaner looking menu, and a new style for character sprites, allowing for much more expressive faces, which was also implemented into the game's promotional art, which looks a lot more anime-esque. Personally, I prefer the first game's art. It looks a lot more like a mature detective story. But one of the bigger changes was this game's new composer, Kenji Yamamoto. I don't know who the first one was, but Yamamoto and this game go hand in hand. With this game's development, Yoshio Sakamoto was inspired by his favorite horror movie, Dario Argento's Deep Red, which heavily associated music with certain images and scenes. You'd understand if you watched the movie, which I did for this video, and I'd say it was pretty good. Check it out if you're into horror movies. So anyways, Sakamoto worked closely with Kenji Yamamoto to make sure every track fit with the scene they played in, making the game a lot more atmospheric. Instead of having shocking murders with graphic corpses, he wanted more of a subtle sense of fear while you played. They also added a 3D maze to a fucking text-based adventure game. Doesn't get any scarier than that. This game follows the same player-named protagonist from the first one, but 2 years prior. One night, while running away from an orphanage to find his parents, he meets a private detective who takes him in as an assistant. Your first independent case is to investigate the murder of a high school student, Yoko Kojima. Yoko, along with her best friend Ayumi, ran a detective club at their school. Once Yoko started investigating a ghost story that had been going around for years, well, things went a little too far. The game had the same release strategy, with Part 1 releasing on May 23rd, 1989, and Part 2 releasing on June 30th, 1989. The changes in tone and feel were well received, however, some parts were definitely held back by the hardware it released on. Why would someone like me say this? Well, that's because someone like me actually has played this game. It was remade on Super Famicom through the Nintendo Power Cartridge Rewriting Service, which was similar in concept to the Famicom Disk System, as these cartridges were rewritable at a cheaper price than just buying dedicated cartridges. This version was translated by the legendary duo of Tomato and Demiforce, who were and still are famous for many other works. They released the ROM online on October 10th, 2004 as Famicom Detective Club, The Girl in Back, which was called that due to text limitations, but personally I prefer Who Stands Behind. This is how I, and anyone else interested in this game, have played it, and personally, I fucking love this game. Like, I could go on and on about how much I love it. There's just so much to talk about with this game. Like, this probably deserves like its own separate video. I'd probably talk endlessly about how you feel immersed in this world, and how the music is godlike, and how each character is interesting, and the story's so good, and figuring out how everything pieces together is so fun. But considering this video is only gonna get like 10 views, I think it's best to hold off for now. Let's just go over the things that they changed in this remake. The game had vastly improved graphics, going for a similar style to Donkey Kong Country, where it looks like a pre-rendered 3D image, and it works pretty well here. The soundtrack was completely revamped, with tons of new tracks and extensions to old ones, a memo system that allowed you to review information about any character at any given time, a personality and compatibility test based on your actions throughout the game, adding a whole bunch of replayability. They even got rid of that stupid maze. And on top of all of that, it didn't suffer from the 2-disc release problem, as it was released on a single ROM on On April 1st, 1998. Wait, what? This was released during the Nintendo 64 era. I can only imagine how hard this thing flopped. Which brings us to... Before this remake, there was one last, completely original title, releasing on the Satellaview in 1997, meaning that is literally everything I can say about it simply because of that fact. Okay, there's actually more we do know. For one, it completely focuses on Ayumi Tachibana and explores her family and history. There's voice acting, with Ayumi being voiced by Yuko Minaguchi, who probably had other important roles that I don't know about. If you didn't know, the Satellaview was an add-on to the Super Famicom as a collaboration with the now-defunct radio broadcasting company, St. Giga. It had games, radio dramas, and magazines streamed to it via satellite to be played at scheduled times, kind of like TV or radios. It allowed for orchestrated music and voice acting to be played during these games, which is probably the only benefit the platform had to, making actual cartridge-based games. The more I think about this service, the more I think about the missed opportunities it created. But moving on, the series remained Japan exclusive for a ton of reasons. For one, development costs would be extremely high due to the sheer amount of text alone, and the size of these games were massive at the time, seeing as the first two games released on 2 discs each. It would be nearly impossible to maintain the release strategy, and it'd be just as bad trying to cram that all into a single cartridge, and the game had no appeal to Western gamers at the time. That's not even considering these games are rich in their mature themes, with murder, references to alcohol and sex, smoking, murder. See what I'm getting at here? There's no possible way this would have slid past Nintendo of America at the time. Despite whatever drawbacks these games had, the series was, and possibly still is, beloved by Japanese Nintendo fans. So much so that Ayumi Tachibana was considered to be playable for Super Smash Bros. Melee. It's weird to think about at the time, but Famicom Detective Club was still very fresh in Nintendo's and fans' minds, as the latest release was only 3 years before Melee in 2001. But Masahiro Sakurai, despite being a big fan of the series, supposedly turned her down because of her obscurity outside of Japan. But there's actually more to this. For anyone who mentions, oh, how come Ayumi didn't make it, but Marth and Redmarth did? Well, Sakurai also stated that if a character from Famicom Detective Club were to, say, be beating the shit out of Mario, then it wouldn't be a true representation of the character, and would probably disappoint fans. If you haven't noticed, Ayumi is, well, a Japanese schoolgirl. Any sort of moveset that Sakurai or anyone else could come up with would be either really stretching, or it'd be mostly fabricated for the sake of Smash. Now compare that to Marth, who is a skilled sword fighter and a battle strategist. You can make like 8 movesets off of that concept. And they did. Even with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where a regular ass dog and duck, some Animal Crossing characters, an actual toy, or a yoga instructor can join Smash, I still think the Smash team would have a hard time coming up with a moveset, considering the amount of source material she had in 2001 is the same amount of source material she has now. Once Ayumi was left on the cutting room floor for Melee, only to appear as a trophy in that game, the series kinda went nowhere. The series did get a re-release on Game Boy Advance through the Famicom mini-series, which means, hey, it can be played on official American hardware since the Game Boy Advance is region-free. Yeah, being a Japanese text-based adventure game, if anyone outside of Japan wants to play this, well, they better be a proficient Google Translate user, because there's really no better option right now. Damn it. It's also shown up on all 3 systems with Virtual Console in Japan, those being the Wii, 3DS, and Wii U. It had a microgame in WarioWare Touch, only in the Japanese version, a little snippet of the title theme in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, a spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, a costume in Super Mario Maker, a badge through the Nintendo 3DS Badge Arcade, a cancelled costume in Bayonetta 2. Ah, damn it. And that's it. Aside from being totally dead, These games were extremely impactful on the developers who worked on it. After Famicom Detective Club Part 2, Nintendo R&D 1 mainly focused on Game Boy games, but their next big console release was none other than this game. This right here, this is one of my favorite games of all time, and I don't really need to explain why here, but after playing Famicom Detective Club Part 2, I can see a lot of what makes that game special in this one. I feel like if Famicom Detective Club didn't have all the unique for Nintendo things that it has, then Super Metroid could have turned out very differently. I mean, yeah, the first two Metroid games obviously had an influence, but whatever. Super Metroid went on to be an innovation in a newly forming genre, and inspired countless of developers and players. And Famicom Detective Club has plenty of influence over its own genre, inspiring games like Phoenix Wright, and probably others I don't know about. It's honestly a shame whenever a series like this goes under, likely to never be brought back. It's even worse when a game has never been released overseas under official localization, and even if it is, it's used to promote Nintendo's shitty marketing strategies. Honestly, I have barely any hope left for these games and any other forgotten Nintendo series I've grown to love over the years. And you know, the bullcrap Nintendo's been playing recently really makes me just want to
put your sleuthing skills to the test in 2 classic murder mystery games.
Never mind. The announcement of Famicom Detective Club being remade for the Switch was really cool back in September 2019, but there was no word of an official localization until February 17th, 2021. Honestly, I couldn't be happier with what's going on. The remakes look absolutely amazing, breathing so much life into these games than what I could ever anticipate. I remember seeing the first look at the remake in 2019, and I thought the UI looked a little bland, and the character redesigns didn't really resonate with me. But the newest footage and screenshots threw most of my criticism out the window. Even though, yeah, the art style could definitely look better. Each scene looks so beautifully animated, and the characters are so much more expressive than what 16-bits has me accustomed to. And the music, oh my god, the music! I've watched the Nintendo Direct trailer like every day since the announcement. That's just how excited I am for these games. Now as for everyone else, well, why don't we just look online and see how others reacted to this groundbreaking announcement?
They're doing the thing called a content sandwich, where they're like, then here, we got like a little bit of like the sauce that no one particularly cares for. We have like the mustard here. This is a weird sandwich. This is like the mustard of the Direct. Like, I don't know. I don't like mustard, so no one else likes mustard in my own personal little closed bubble of a brain.
Yeah, that in my opinion, it starts to become a little bit of a slog until you get to the midway point of the Direct. We have this visual novel game, which I honestly know nothing about. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Figure out who the culprit is before it's too late.
I have nothing to say in reaction to this. But I feel obligated to say something. You came here for my reaction.
Detective Club, The Missing Heir, and Famicom Detective Club, The Girl Who Stands Behind.
The missing heir? It's not missing, you just can't say it.
Pre-orders begin today on Nintendo.
Because it's air.
Well, that's exactly why I'm making this video. I'm making it my mission to spread awareness about Famicom Detective Club and get as many people interested in these games as possible, because these games are just so different from what one would expect out of Nintendo, and the success of these games is crucial to what Nintendo has in store for the future. If you're a fan of a series that hasn't seen the light of day in over a decade, like Star Tropics or Wario Land, or Custom Robo, or F-Zero, or Doshin the Giant, or Sin and Punishment, then please play these games. If you want to see other unlocalized games come to the West, like Mother 3, or Captain Rainbow, or Tomato Adventure, or Marvelous, or the first couple of Starfy games, or the force full of other text-based adventure games that Nintendo's made and I haven't mentioned here, like the Famicom Mukashibanashi series, Time Twist, Hajimari no Mori, or even the extremely recent Bunny Mission Bond, then please play these games. Supporting the Famicom Detective Club remakes shows that not only us as Nintendo fans, but Nintendo as well, that we care about these games, and this can open the door for so many other dead Nintendo franchises to make a comeback. I cannot stress enough how important this is, and I need other people to understand this as well. And that's about it for me. I gotta say, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. This was a huge project on my path, just seeing how long this took to complete. Like, not only am I pretty sure that my hair has basically grown throughout this video, but we are only like hours away from the game's release. Isn't that right, Source Gaming? Okay, but that's enough shitting on that video, because that one is honestly really great too, and covered things that not even I knew about. I'm not out here to be some big YouTuber. I'm just trying to spread awareness about these games, and I just felt obligated to do it because of how little talk there is of this online. So go check it out if you haven't already. If you are or are becoming a Famicom Detective Club fan yourself, then, well, share around these videos, get more people to know about these games. Now, if you know me personally and watch this whole video, please send help.